Happy Friday! Today is September 5th. This week, we take a look at when it's the right time for a brand to embark on an agency review versus how you can make your current agency work better for you. Plus, a look at Group Black's rebrand and why companies are doing test runs with CMOs before hiring them. This is Ad Age Insider, taking you behind the scenes of the industry's biggest stories with the reporters who wrote them. I'm your host, Parker Harron. Launching an agency review is a major undertaking. Months of work and millions of dollars, plus the cost and friction of transitioning after that. Sometimes it's necessary, but sometimes dissatisfaction within a brand-agency relationship might be an opportunity to evaluate shortcomings and come out the other side as stronger partners. This is the idea behind why consultancies are increasingly offering marriage counseling for marketers and agencies, rather than just leaping straight into a review. Undergoing this process might identify key issues in both the agency and marketers' practices while saving the time, money, and tears of a review. Plus, it's a growing lane of business for consultants to tap into as that line of work faces new challenges. Ad Age senior agency reporter Lindsay Rittenhouse hopped on the phone with me to discuss the ins and outs of brand agency marriage counseling, and why you may want to think twice before giving up on your agency partner or risk buyer's remorse. Hi, Lindsay. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So you recently published a story on Ad Age tossing around the question, when is it necessary for a brand to find a new agency? And I was thinking first, if you could set the stage for me, I'm wondering what you'd observed in either industry trends or changes that inspired this topic for you to pursue.
Yeah, so I think it started kind of because we have reported that consultants have been kind of getting into new revenue streams and offering different services outside of just running the, costly, lengthy reviews. And they started introducing this thing called marriage counseling, which is essentially, they sit down and they talk to agencies and clients that maybe are having issues and try to get at the bottom of it and resolve any issues before the account goes into review. So we knew consultants have been doing this. So the next step for us was kind of like, okay, well, what does this marriage counseling entail? And how do you know if you need that or you need to go into review? And some outside things were happening kind of as well. My colleague Ewan Larkin did a story recently on how client agency tenure has been improving in recent years. So we're kind of seeing maybe the results of this marriage counseling and like how it's created longer lasting relationships. And yeah.
Awesome. I want to come back to this idea of agency client counseling. I think it's really interesting, and I personally had never heard of this. But first, I'm curious, you do such a good job in your story on Ad Age at mapping out the criteria for why a brand might want to seek a new agency, and our listeners should definitely go read that on Ad Age. I'll have your article linked in this episode's description. But give me a sense of what's at stake here. If I'm feeling like meh about my agency, no huge deal breakers, but I'm wanting to switch it up, why wouldn't I just want to go do a review and find a new one?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Reviews take a lot of time. They're really costly. I mean, 1 million plus for both, the client and the agency participating. A lot of resources have to be used. It's a lot of, time, like I said, a lot of people who are then having to either manage this review or pitch the account. So on both sides, it takes a lot. And, sometimes the grass isn't always greener. There are things that consultants kind of pointed out to me, like some marketers that have kind of buyer's regret afterwards. And, it's not always the best thing to jump to a new agency that also requires like a lot of resources to make that change on the part of the marketer. And if we're in an economy where, you're kind of strapped for resources, it can be a big deal. So maybe it is just about looking and rekindling the relationship. And sometimes, an agency that you've worked with for a long time and knows the ins and out of your business, it's better to stick with them.
Yes, and one of the things that you mentioned in your article that I found really interesting on why it might not be a great idea to just instantly go for find new agency is that 70% of agencies said they regularly decline pitches. And I thought this was kind of an interesting counterpoint to this idea that I feel like at least I always have, where accounts are an agency's to win or lose. But there's some pressure on the other side as well that this stat was indicating. What's going on there?
Yeah, what you're referring to is also, a client might not always get the agency they're after. So if you're putting, I think, your account to review, a client has to think, a marketer has to think like, is it really worth putting into review? Because the agency you might want, whatever that hot agency is right now, might not want to pitch your account. They might decline it. They might, have a conflict client, or they just might not have the bandwidth to pitch your business at that time. So, yeah, that's another thing to consider before going into review is that, you might have this idea in your head, like, I really want to work with that agency, or I want, you have a handful of agencies and they might all decline. So, yeah.
And are there any connections here between what you're reporting and you could say, I guess, the state of the new business marketplace? I hear constantly about these agency new business leads being worked to the bone and how many more pitches can we take? And I just wonder, like, generally, is this a good or bad time to be pitching an account?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard it too. People feel like they're constantly pitching, and now you're seeing agencies, some of like the hottest creative agencies that I've even talked to saying like, well, we just can't take on anymore. Our people are strapped and we're not going to pitch anymore. So, yeah, I mean, do you want to launch a review in that environment? That's up to you. I mean, do you want to just, add to the noise? And again, that kind of goes back to the stat of the agency you want might not have the bandwidth to pitch your account. They might not have the means. So, yeah, I mean, it's a tough time right now. And I think the shift to project work just made it even tougher. There's just constant pitches going on. So, yeah.
So let's get back to this marriage counseling, which again I thought was interesting. I personally had never heard of. And the idea being, as you summarized earlier, that instead of just going full hog on new agency, why don't I actually put in a little work, sit down with my agency, identify the disconnects, and see how we can move forward? You had outlined how costly and time intensive an agency review can be. Do you have an idea of like this marriage counseling, how it compares? Is this service cheaper? Is it faster? Like, does it solve those problems of why you might not want to do an agency review?
Yeah, so I honestly don't know what consultants charge for it. I imagine it's a lot cheaper and a lot less time to go through. It involves, a series of interviews with the agency. It involves a series of interviews with the marketer and then kind of some interviews all together to kind of work out the problems. I think in general, like a lot of people would probably agree, therapy is beneficial, even if you don't stick together, you might uncover some issues on the agency or brand side that will help in other relationships. Maybe there's a time management issue. Maybe there's an issue around providing the right feedback, anything like that. But I think you can unearth some issues in the relationship, and whether you choose to then stick together or go into review, I think you'll still get takeaways that could help you in the long run.
Interesting. So you might, one, learn something about yourself that wasn't vibing here. But two, I do want to make sure you flag what are the hard stops on a relationship. Like, if I'm listening to this and thinking, oh, my agency has done something really horrible to me, but maybe I'll try this. Like, what are the things that should be the red flags not to do counseling and just go for that full review?
I think if your agency partner has not been transparent with you, if there was some sort of issue with like lying or hiding something, a transparency issue, I think that is probably the only time you want to really get right into a review. Maybe if it's also just a matter of price, like you just can't afford this agency right now and the agency cannot keep lowering their fees, that might also be like an irreconcilable difference. So I think, there are certain things, but it's funny you mentioned this because I wanted this story to be a little bit more interactive and visual. So when we originally discussed it, I was discussing it with, my editor Judy, and we were talking about maybe putting in questions and just having people answer a series of questions. And if it goes, you answer yes to this question, you have to go into review, or no to this question, no, you don't. But it's like a lot more nuanced than that. So it really takes the consultant to dig in and find the issues and like have those different interviews.
Something that wasn't specifically called out in your story that I was feeling on the outside edges creeping in is we've talked about agency and brand, but you also mentioned at the top that consultancies are looking for new products to offer, new services to offer. What does this marriage counseling, what did you find it kind of said about the state of the consultancy as well?
Yeah, so consultants have been under pressure as well. I think a lot of brands are handling reviews themselves. Some are just outright, skirting reviews, and there are a lot of new relationships that we hear between agencies and clients that are just kind of happening through relationships. And, this is the ad business. It's all, relationship driven. But I think the number of reviews that are handled by consultants is declining, or at least there are pressure from other, entities. There are new consultants coming up. So, yeah, consultants needed to kind of rethink their business and introduce new services that they can then charge for. So, I think, marriage counseling is one of them. But it's also been happening for a while, maybe not as explicitly as like calling it marriage counseling, but I talked to Joanne Davis, one of the leading consultants in this space, and she said she always asks a brand that comes to her wanting to launch a review, like, can we fix the relationship first? And I think a lot of consultants have always kind of led with that. I think, if you're a trusted consultant who wants to do best by the client, you should be asking that question because, sometimes it'll be a simple answer and be like, well, that's why you want to launch a review? Come on. Like maybe we can fix this relationship. So
The other issue that I wanted to hit on with you that's very interesting to me is the mention in your story of the account lead at the agency and how much emphasis has been placed recently on the account lead being make or break. I'm curious what you'd heard around this about any like volatility with that role. Is there a real crunch around account leads, or is this just like a non-issue?
I don't know if I've heard that there is like a ton of extra pressure on this role right now. I think it's a good question to ask. It's definitely an important thing to be thinking about because they have a lot of churn right now that will cause maybe a client to go into review if they constantly see new people on their accounts, and especially your trusted account lead. I mean, that's the person that clients should be going to first, that they really should trust, that they really should have a good relationship with. And yeah, I think sometimes it's as simple as asking for a new account lead if it's not, gelling, but at the same time, we're seeing layoffs. There are a lot of smaller agencies coming up that may not have the employee count to just switch out a new account lead and substitute it with another person that's on the same level, or so yeah, I mean that's a good question to kind of dig into. I think it, like most of our stories, when we come out of it, we have more questions, and then there are like more stories that we can do. So I could see, yeah, some coverage there. And if anybody listening has any thoughts, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. I'm curious before we go, any other main takeaways or even surprises for you as you were reporting this story that our listeners might want to be tuned into?
I think the biggest surprise for me was just hearing how easily some marketers are ready to launch a review. Like how they're just like, okay, I have this one little issue. I want to launch a major time-consuming, costly review. I think, the anecdote that sets up the whole story of this one financial services, company, this SVP of marketing there wanted to launch a review just because they had an issue with, the account lead. And Joanne Davis was like, just ask for a new account lead, see if that's possible. And then like it fixed the whole relationship. So I think that was really surprising. I just didn't know that marketers were so chomping at the bit, ready to just launch a review like that. So yeah.
The old closed mouths don't get fed. Maybe just ask for what you want. Always good advice. All right, well, thank you so much, Lindsay. Always a pleasure chit-chatting with you. So I'll look forward to the next time you're on the podcast.
Yes, thank you.
This week's account review to know. Publix Supermarkets shook up its agency roster last week, 6 months after retaining agency 22 Squared to handle media for the grocery chain. Publix has taken its media account to agency Known. This comes after Publix transitioned its creative business from 22 Squared to Fig in February. A few more headlines to know before your weekend. Group Black is changing its name. It will now be called Portrait Media Group under new parent company Group Black Holdings. The reorganization shifts the company's focus solely from Black audiences to what co-founder and chief strategy officer Bon & Bo called, quote, Gen Next in an exclusive interview with Ad Age. Bo defines Gen Next as multicultural audiences that identify beyond just race and encompasses many non-white ethnicities, including Black audiences. Group Black launched in 2021 with the goal of growing ad spend for Black-owned media companies that were members of its collective. But industry leaders have previously told Ad Age that Group Black hadn't lived up to its initial promises. Now, Bo confirmed to Ad Age that Group Black did not meet its initial pledge to direct $500 million to its members. However, Bo is adamant that the shift to Portrait Media Group has always been in Group Black's plan, and that it is not meant to be a move away from its initial mission statement to serve diverse businesses and audiences. Despite this news coming amid a business landscape in which companies are caught in the middle of a political war on DEI, Bo told Ad Age that the rebrand is, quote, in no way a reaction to external commentary. A core piece of the shift is data. Portrait Media Group also announced the launch of proprietary AI platform Prism CI. Prism CI blends insights related to consumer behavior and what the company called creator mapping to target its next-gen audience. For example, Bo said instead of using credit scores for targeting with a financial services client, alternative data such as gas purchases can help lenders better understand young, multicultural audiences who have a different relationship to credit. Portrait Media Group also launched an experiential and content practice called Portrait Studios. Go inside the rebrand at the link in this episode's description. And the idea of test running a CMO before hiring them outright is a growing trend for businesses. In recent months, brands including JCPenney, Airbnb, and Solo Brands have hired CMOs after an interim or consulting period. In the first 6 months of 2025, 10.8% of CMO moves tracked by recruiting firm Taligence were in a fractional capacity before full-time. That's up from just over 7% last year. This trend has also seen the rise of services that offer temporary marketers for hire, such as chief outsiders. Click the link to the Ad Age article in this episode's description to dig into how to get noticed for an interim or consulting marketer role. Plus, 2 big moves this week. On Tuesday, a federal judge ruled that Google would not have to sell its Chrome internet browser. The possibility was first raised last year to address the decision that Google held an illegal monopoly on the internet search business. The decision on Chrome accompanies other victories for Google this week in the case. Also, Kraft Heinz Co. announced Tuesday that it plans to split into 2 separate companies. One company will be called Global Taste Elevation Co. and house Heinz ketchup, Kraft mac and cheese, and other sauces and seasonings, while the other company will be called North American Grocery Co. and include products such as Oscar Mayer hot dogs and Lunchables. But those names might change in the future. Dig into the implications for Kraft Heinz agency partners, personnel, and ad spending at adage.com, linked in this episode's description. Finally, get tickets for Ad Age's Business of Brands conference. The conference takes place September 16th and 17th in Chicago. You'll hear from marketing leaders from brands including McDonald's, Hasbro, Ulta Beauty, and General Mills. Plus, get an exclusive first look at Ad Age's upcoming Future of Advertising content package. You won't want to miss it. Buy tickets at the link in this episode's show notes. And this week on Ad Age's Marketer's Brief, Manscaped's CMO talks the value of an unconventional media strategy. Listen to that on the Marketer's Brief podcast, available on your favorite podcast platform. Go deeper on any of the stories I've mentioned today by clicking the links in this episode's description. If you enjoyed Ad Age Insider, why don't you subscribe on your favorite podcast platform? Have a topic you want me to dig into? Email your ideas to aapodcast@adage.com or DM me, Parker Heron, on LinkedIn. Thank you to my guest, Lindsay Rittenhouse, Senior Agency Reporter at Ad Age, and to producer Lauren Ciardio. Thanks to you for listening. I'm Parker Heron, and this is Ad Age Insider. Enjoy your weekend.